Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by 3 Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for coffee and conversation. Cera Reine Meintzer is a meditation instructor and life coach, building foundations of mindfulness and inner strength with her clients. She works with individuals ready to live life on their terms and specializes in working with HSPs, or highly sensitive persons. She is also a gerontologist, teacher, artist, wife, and mother of 3.
Well, welcome everybody. I'm so excited about this particular episode because, I always get to share it with 2 very accomplished women, Teresa and Danielle. And Teresa is still accomplished, but she's not with us today. Who we do have with us today is Cera. You know Cera. Cera has been with Masterpiece. She's been on previous podcasts. And Cera, we're very happy to have you today. I've got a big job for you. You're going to have to tell me a lot of things that I need to know and have yet not learned, even in spite of all my decades on this earth. So, and Danielle, you teach me every day anyway. So I'm going to learn a lot today. And what am I going to learn about? Well, we're humans, and the currency of being human successfully is communication, our ability to communicate with another human. And this sounds a little rough, but we tend to suck at it. We mess it up. We make errors, and we get tied up in our own emotions and our thoughts and our monkey mind, and all this stuff gets in the way, and we never really communicate. Now today, our focus was team members in senior living, because in senior living, healthy aging is about the entire culture. So that's everybody in the community, including all call them staff, call them team members, call them associates. And we would like to arm everybody, not arm isn't a good term, but empower everyone to be able to communicate better, to be able to to navigate through some sensitive, touchy things that may happen between 2 people, or in order that you can help. You may be in dietary, you may be in security, but you have the ability to help another human being through some tough times. And we want to give you those skills. We've got the right people today. And by the way, you don't have to work in senior living to benefit from this show. I know I'm going to, and I look forward to it. Enough of me. Cera, welcome again.
Thank you, Roger.
So tell us what your day-to-day professional life is like. And this is about communication, but it could be called coaching. It can be called just being human and being empathetic. But I'm turning it over to you. And Danielle, we're going to be hearing from you, right?
Absolutely. Coaching is kind of a tricky word, right? But it's a profession. It's something that's very needed in the world. I think many of the people that I work with coaching will say, God, everybody should have a life coach. I mean, that's like a mentor, like a best friend, like a great parent, like an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent. So we use the word coaching, but it is so much of that is thinking outside of the box and holding space for people to process, really. So I spend a good portion of my time doing that, specifically with a population that makes up 20% actually of our population, which is called highly sensitive person, or HSP. Elaine Aron is the researcher who kind of discovered this trait. And someone who is highly sensitive is really overwhelmed by the world. They take on other people's emotions. They're not just empathetic, but they soak those in. It's almost like they become their own. It's what they feel is someone else's emotions. So, and 70% of those people are introverts. So communication can be really scary when you know, one, that you're going to take on the other person's feelings, and two, that you have to interact with someone and maybe be there and listen and say something back that sounds amazing or is helpful. But I would say to those specific people, holding the space is really, really, really what makes the difference in our human worlds. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And because we're supposed to do double the listening as we are the talking. So you would be surprised how much you can impact someone's day by truly listening and hearing what they're saying, and listening between the words, between the lines. What's the deeper meaning that's going on? And that might sound intense or like it requires a lot of training, but it really doesn't. It's just stopping and truly taking a moment to listen, which I know in senior living and many other industries, it can be hard to stop and take a minute because you're probably wearing a lot of hats.
Oh, this is interesting, an interesting concept of highly sensitive people. So this can be the person you're talking to, or it can be you.
Absolutely.
And they may be sharing something with you that you're having difficulty processing yourself because you're a highly sensitive person. So it goes both ways. So I think we're kind of lowering the threshold of where we might be able to help people. We're getting probably the most difficult ones. Would that be fair to say, Cera, that someone who's highly sensitive, that's a particularly challenging communication event?
Yes, because they have a lot more. If you're the person who is highly sensitive, or you're talking to someone who is, they have a very deep processing system. Their nervous system is different and it processes at a lot deeper. They also notice subtleties. So I think that applies highly to body language. So in some ways, they're taking in a lot more than someone who's not an HSP, but they may not have any idea what to do with it on either end, if you're talking to them or if you're the person who is.
Okay, well, I learned something already. So whether you are an HSP or you're going to talk to an HSP, today you should be listening, because when this is over, we're going to have skills that are going to improve our communication skills with not only older adults, but friends, spouses, children, everything, eh? Great.
Yes, absolutely.
Danielle?
Yeah. Well, Cera, she brought up 2 really great points, whether you're highly sensitive or just a compassionate human being.
Mm-hmm.
She brought up holding the space, and I love that. And you already talked about body language. So if you don't mind, I'm going to break them into 2 parts because they're both really important. What we hear from many team members and associates at communities is they want to hold the space and be there, but they're worried, what if I make somebody cry? Did I just break the person? Or what if I get overcome with emotion that I start crying? So how can you be compassionate without, upsetting the balance, so to speak?
Being a mess. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you are an HSP or you're talking to one, not that this whole episode is about HSPs, but HSPs also have highly developed emotional senses. Like, I as an HSP can cry at a commercial. Like, I'm just brought to tears like that. So I know when I'm talking to someone, if it's remotely emotional or a story from the past that's touching, I'm going to cry. Like, I'm going to get teary-eyed, and that's going to happen. And I have learned for myself, I've just learned fighting against all of our cultural norms that say, you can't show those emotions because it makes other people uncomfortable and people don't know what to do and you're not supposed to cry. And trying to just remember, like, this isn't natural. It's okay for me to cry. It might feel uncomfortable just because of our cultural setting. So that's not the answer for everyone, but it is good to recognize if you are someone who does that easily, to kind of try to prepare yourself. Also, you probably touched, when I worked in senior living, I was touched every day by stories, by residents coming to me and sharing things and putting on events that, highlighted things from the past that were meaningful for them. So it's a hard question to answer because everyone's so different. But I do think the most important thing to know, two things I'll say, is one, that we don't live in an emotionally healthy culture where emotions are readily accepted. Even I think about the NFL banning celebration dances after touchdowns. It's like, wait, we're not allowed to celebrate anymore. So any show of big emotion is like, it's not okay in our culture. So know that a piece of of that is not on you. It's where you've grown up. And then the other thing I would say is creating space, like you said, Danielle, in yourself, and creating a place, like we've said in Masterpiece, to be the plate, to hold it for someone else's emotions, and know that you're not breaking them. Emotions are natural and normal, and you can always ask, how can I support you? Is there anything that I can do to help you? I see that you're emotional. That's okay. It's okay to call that out.
Yeah, I love that. And what I also love is when you mentioned body language, and I also, as a coach, I listen for key words when people repeat things and they don't realize they're saying them. So with body language, and anybody can do this. If you're talking to someone and they're slumped over, that's a very different reaction than when you say, hey, would you like to go dancing? And they're like dancing and they light up, and like their posture completely lights up when it's something they enjoy. So watch for those very distinct cues.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I would say, again, the words, when you're talking to somebody, if they're using the words sensitivity or social connection, or people tend to use a word over and over again without realizing it. If I can give a quick example, I was talking to somebody who was trying to find their purpose. And in the course of a 20-minute conversation, she must have said connecting people, bringing people together like 10 times. And so it was just about exploring that.
Yeah. Yes.
To me, the one of the most difficult things as a physician, that's a little bit of a different environment, but I was there to help people, and then we're talking about associates who want to do that, and you don't have to go into a conversation with the idea you're going to help someone, but if it comes up, is to tolerate silences. I think that is probably the most difficult. I think probably for just about everybody, that everyone wants to fill in a silence, even if it's with garbage. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I did that. Whatever. And yet it's in silences that I think you can sort of encourage people to go a little deeper in what they're telling you. That's been my experience. Is that yours, Cera?
Absolutely. We don't like silence in our culture. It's not, everything is so bombarding and big and loud. And I think that silence is also a way that you can hold that space. It's just another way to do that and let someone be how they are and feel what they feel. And truly, I think about it kind of as a heart connection. When you're in that space and you're listening, you could imagine too that your heart is connecting with their heart. And then that makes that silence that much easier to have, because there's still this connection that's happening, even though there's no words being spoken.
You're talking about, we know about mirror neurons. Those who don't know about mirror neurons, now that we can do brain scans, if someone is experiencing an emotion and someone is observing them and they do brain scans on both, the same neurons are activated, which is probably the physical depiction of empathy. And we're more, that's a human thing. We're more likely to do that than to not do that. And so, see, and back, if I could, if I'm saying something and someone tears up, I know that I've connected in a very special way. Mm-hmm. Or if I tear up at something they say, I hope they feel the same way. And I bet they do. Now, if you turn into a blubbering idiot, you're not going to really help anyone very much. But I think, some tears or some show of emotion is not weakness. It's not, it doesn't interfere with your ability to help them. To me, I think it's just being real.
Before I ask Cera the next question, I want to say, as a coach, we don't usually call people blubbering idiots, but
in the military, we do.
We'll give Dr. Roger a pass because of his military experience and as the host of the show. So, I'd like to talk a little bit about the value of listening. A couple of statistics. We spend 80% of our waking day communicating. 45% of that is listening to other people. And you know what? We only retain about 25% of that conversation. Some of it is because we're simply hardwired for safety reasons. It's in our DNA to pick out the important stuff and we discard the rest. And some of it is we're just distracted, as Roger, as you would say, our monkey mind. The scary thing is we forget nearly 50% of what we've heard in about 8 hours. So my question for you, Cera, is how to be a good listener. How would you advise people, and how can they retain the important stuff?
That's a good question. I think everybody's memories work a little bit differently in the nuance level, but most of us, what we do is we connect things in our minds, right? And those of us who are connectors do that even more. But we connect them to things that we remember. So something from our past. So if we're listening to a story, we're connecting all the time. How does that relate to me? And I think that is one way that we enhance our memory. And so noticing, if you're doing that.
So Cera, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. So, and you too, Danielle, the basic tenet of coaching or of effective communication is asking open-ended questions. What does that mean? Well, give me some examples, or what are you trying to do when you say open-ended questions?
So open-ended at its most simplest form means that you can't answer yes or no to it. That's the most basic definition. But it usually begins with who or what, or we try to avoid why in the coaching world, because why can often make people feel like they're put on the spot, or that there's some judgment behind it. Yeah. What would you add, Danielle?
That was a great definition. I would say when you ask those questions, I just have some examples. So, for example, what do you want most for yourself at this time in your life? In what way are your values in line with your current goals, or how are they not aligned? And that comes into play when you're around people or in situations or sometimes work where there's something questionable ethically and you just feel wrong about it. So checking in with your values. And then for the person talking to a resident, how can I support you in moving forward with this? What do you need from me? Or what makes this pursuit meaningful to you?
Masterpiece is driven by data and powered by content. Maximizing healthy longevity is achievable at all times with the right metrics and content, enabling informed decisions. Powered by Masterpiece can support your community in the critical areas of focus that drive healthy longevity for your residents, staff, and community. Learn more at mymasterpieceliving.com.
When I've heard frequently both of you say is someone may say, well, I want this, or if only this were the case, or whatever. And your response is, well, what would that look like?
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, yeah, and that makes them go deeper as to what this is and why do you want it and what do you expect to happen?
And it's funny that you use what does that look like? Because for an HSAP or sensitive person, I would say, what does that feel like? So depending on who I'm talking to will be the difference where I say, how do you picture it or how do you feel it?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a real beauty of open-ended questions is they make people think outside of the box. You get outside of your normal thinking pattern, and they're curiosity questions. And you may or may not know this, but the sound that comes with curiosity that literally changes the brain patterns or what's going on in your mind is which we do naturally. We're like, I wonder, but that is the wonder question. So if I ask somebody a coaching question and they're like, they want to say, I don't know, I will say to them, we'll just wonder about it a little bit. And it does the job every time. It just opens up that space.
That's playing someone not that wants silence in your favor to get them to speak,
Yes.
So that you do that. Nice. Very nice.
With your child, think of children. Children are so curious. They wonder and wonder and wonder until adults say, oh, just stop wondering and do it. And we almost get it educated out of ourselves. So give yourself permission to kind of have that childlike questioning and curiosity.
Yes, absolutely. That's so true. And I think the other thing that it does really is it moves your conscious brain out of the way for a second so that your subconscious brain, which is really so much smarter, can peek through and give you like a little nugget.
All right. So I've learned some things here. I've learned about highly sensitive people. And that can be a challenge. And that's probably one of the most difficult challenges. But communicating with anyone, I should listen more. I should ask these open-ended questions. If I shouldn't be afraid to show emotion short of blubbering idiot. No, because that's communicating. And that I've got a lot more to learn, as we all do probably, about communication. But I think if we're authentic about it and we truly want to hear what they have to say and feel what they're feeling, that's probably the entrance ticket to get some effective communication.
And as you know,
how did
Roger,
I do?
Great. That was perfect. As you know, Roger, it all comes back to mindfulness, right? I mean, you can't be a good listener if you're not present. And when you're working in an industry where there's a million things to do and tons of people to serve, and you love that, but you still have a lot of stress on your shoulders of things to get done, it can be really hard to pause, not multitask, and be present. But when you can do that, that's when those relationships flourish and those connections get made, because emotions really do connect us. So if you have that emotional moment with a resident or with a fellow team member, you're building relationships right there. So you could look at it as a positive thing rather than a challenge.
Oh, sure. Well, I know that you both agree with this, but I'm reminded of the movie City Slickers. Remember City Slickers?
I do.
And
Billy
Curly,
Crystal.
the old grizzled guy, says the one thing that matters in life, and the city cowboy says, "Well, what is that?" He says, "Only you can really know." But as far as I'm concerned, it's mindfulness. For me personally. But I think really, I don't want to tell everybody what the one thing is, but I think that is the entrance to maybe further on more defined one thing, but you're not going to get there without mindfulness.
Yep. Yeah.
And you know what happens when you're mindful? Not only are you setting aside distractions, but it's really hard to be judgmental when you're being present for someone. Because if you're mindful, you're not thinking, I disagree with what they just said, and here's all the facts to support why they're wrong. If you put that aside, you're going to be less judgmental and less likely to lead people, say, to your conclusion, I would think. So I have one more question for Cera, because Cera, you've worked within organizations more than I have. I'm curious about how, when somebody comes for support, people say that they want to provide resources and tools to support that person without giving advice. coaches, we're not giving advice. We're just letting them come to their own conclusions. So how did you work that balance?
Yeah, I would usually listen, of course, to what they were saying. And then I would ask them that magic question that Roger said earlier too. Well, what does that look like? And what do you see my role in it being? And then they might say like, well, you're going to do it. You're going to make it happen. Right. Like, and I'm like, well, I definitely would love to be a part of it. But I'll need your support with it. So like, let's be a team. Let's figure it out together and have a conversation about, who can do what and how many people we need to support it. And that's like, if you're talking about planning an activity or an event, something like that. But I think it's the same method for even if it's something happening in their personal life. Most of the time, people really just want someone to listen. They really need someone to listen. And the power in hearing your words out loud is something else that we coaches like to focus on. I mean, that is a selling point of coaching. Yes, you're telling us something, and then you have that aha of, oh, community. I've said community 5 times. Maybe that's what I really would like. And as a coach, because we're present and listening, we can point that out and say, well, this is what I've noticed you saying, what do you think about exploring that? So just, I think it's hard when you're a caretaker too. You want to take it on because it feels good. It feels good to take care of other people. And that's also how caretakers get all that burnout that we experience. I'll say that with 3 children. So I use that at home too. When people come to me, when any of my kids or my husband come to me and need my support, I've really learned how to set boundaries, but also be able to make space for actually listening to them, even if that means later. And then working with them as a team. Like, I would love to help you and see you be successful. Like, tell me how we can work together.
Wow. Well, to me, this is like being human 101, and
Yes.
It probably should be the first in college or high school or grammar school or kindergarten, maybe. This is very, very important things. And I think you both said it so well. And wow. This one's going to be a good one to listen to again and again. So you don't make the same mistakes that you've made in the past and not communicating.
Can I add just one thing to something Cera said? Because that was like the first thing I learned in coaching, because I wanted to fix everybody. And when after they gave me all the information, I wanted to say, here's what you need to do. And I stopped myself and they're waiting for me to offer some gem. Yeah. And the only thing I could think of is, how can I support you? What do you need from me? And it made them think, and they said, well, what would be helpful to me is if you mentioned a resource over here. Can you send me that website so I can research or something? So thank you for bringing that up, Cera, because as helpers, we want to help, but it's really hard for us to not help. And there's nothing saying that we shouldn't, it's just those boundaries around how much of it we take. But if I have a resource with my clients, I just ask for permission from them. I'm like, hey, I do have an idea. Would you be interested in hearing what it is? And like 90% of the time, they're like, yeah, definitely.
Well, put yourself in my situation as a physician. They came to me to get fixed.
Yes.
And so if I don't do that, well, that was a little more difficult.
You were ahead of your time, Doc Roger. Because
I was.
I've been going out in nature and meditating, and they're like, well, can't I just get a pill? Is there a pill?
You got to think like a physical therapist, most of the work is outside of the office here. Most of it's outside.
Yeah. Calling me Dr. Woo-woo, go out in nature, and yet, wow, what therapy, as you said, and so much else, just being present.
So we talked about such great stuff today that could apply to anyone in any coaching situation. But just to kind of recap, if you're using it in senior living, some of the key takeaways include holding the space for someone. It's okay if they're feeling emotion, you can sit with that. You can sit in silence, and silence is okay. you can ask those open-ended, powerful questions like, what do you want for yourself and how can I support you? And then just really listen. And when you're listening, trying not to plan what you're going to say next, or kind of letting your mind wander about some other things, be really present. And I would say the biggest thing is practice non-judgment and not leading someone to your conclusion. Just really listen and just be unequivocally their hero, their supporter.
Well, Cera, thank you. And I think there must be others who want to know how to get in touch with you and learn all the great things that you do. And
yes,
how do they do that?
Yes. So I have a website. That's my main coaching website. And it is, my name is spelled all crazy. So I will spell it all out. My first name is Cera, Cera. And my business is my first and my middle name, which is Reine, which is Renee, but spelt very strangely. So Cera Reine, CeraReine.com. And my email is Cera@CeraReine.com. That's probably the best way.
We'll make sure that all the links that you need are in the description of this podcast.
Perfect.
Thank you, ladies. I'm a lot smarter.
Thanks, Roger. Well, you're making us feel good.
Yeah. Well, see, I'm a listener. That was my goal. All right. Thank you very much. Bye now.
We want to continue to provide information that is valuable and reliable to our listeners. We welcome your comments and suggestions for topics that are important to you. Please see the description of this episode to contact the Brightside team. You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.